Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So today, guys, we will speak about one of the most important highlights of Cairo. It's actually the secrets of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. Why we called it the Egyptian Museum in Cairo? Because imagine, we do have the Egyptian Museum in Berlin. We have the Egyptian Museum in Metropolitan. We have the Egyptian Museum in Turin. We have the Egyptian Museum in here and there. That's why, please, when you speak about the Egyptian Museum, don't say the Egyptian Museum and keep silent. You should say Cairo Egyptian Museum, as we have Egyptian collection in everywhere in the world. That's why we can call it Cairo Egyptian Museum. The museum itself located in Tahrir Square. The most impressive and important highlight in Cairo ever. That's because it have over than 120 or more of the collection. You can imagine the museum itself housing thousands and thousands of the Egyptian collection dates back from the pre-dynastic to the Greco-Roman times. This is the only museum in all of Egypt housing all this huge and great collection. And by the way, if you would like to see the collection of Egypt in some other places, you should visit the Cairo Egyptian Museum at first. So this is the original painting, or the original painting of the Egyptian Museum itself. The Museum of Tahrir, we can call it IMEC. IMEC, it means Egyptian Museum in Cairo. And as we said, it's over than 120. And by the way, Dr. Muhammad Saleh himself, he said it's over than 137 or more of the collection. You can see some of these ones, the display, and some others we can see it in the magazine. This is a very old painting of the museum itself during the time of the opening. As we said, the museum itself housing over than 120 or 137 of the collection. The building itself designed by the French architect Marcel Drogden, and this was something like a competition between lots of people, and the French architect himself, he got he won it. Over than 100 of the display halls. This is, by the way, something amazing. The same question Senor Muhammad was asking me. How can we manage and handle the Grand Egyptian Museum tour? It is the same, by the way. Do you know that, Senor Muhammad and our other friends? When you visit Cairo Egyptian Museum, according to the scholar, if you spend a minute in front of each of this collection, in front of each piece of the collection, you are going to spend nine months. Imagine 9 months. It's not a full day, but 9 months just spend it in the museum to enjoy every single piece in Cairo Egyptian Museum. By the way, let's speak about behind the scene, or the hidden treasure of the museum. It's actually located in the basement or the store of the Egyptian Museum. This is the fantastic collection, which unfortunately you cannot see it. It's actually hidden in the basement, which used as a store for the object of the museum. And by the way, it's not on the display. Sometimes if they would like to get something from the display and put it in the storerooms or the basement, and then they change it from time to time, especially for the temporary exhibits. The museum itself built in 1897 to 1901. It's like 4 years building during the time of Abbas Hilmi himself. When we go to the garden of the museum, we will see the most important thing in here. It is the facade of the museum, and at the middle of the garden, we will see lotus flowers and papyrus plant. And of course, as we know, lotus flowers and papyrus plant together, it's a sign of Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. This is exactly what ancient Egyptian people called it in hieroglyphics, Sema Tawi. Some of the collection like that and that, all the collection, we can see it in the garden. It's made out of a very heavy and strong materials like like granite or the granite like basalt and all of that collection. So you will not see something made out of sandstone, something made out of limestone at the garden. Very important thing in here to see August Mariette, the man who created or got the idea of building the Egyptian Museum himself, and around him the most famous scholars or Egyptologists, archaeologists who started to create what we can call it nowadays Egyptologists. And we should be proud of that, as Egypt is the one and the only country ever in the whole world got special science by its name. So you will never ever hear something called Chinology, Frenchology, Englishology. Only Egypt in the world got that science, which we can call it Egyptology, as we are the most important country in the world, got a great heritage and civilization. Guys, let's start our tour in the Egyptian Museum or Cairo Egyptian Museum. And this is where we can get or the entrance of the museum itself. And as we know, the display itself in the museum, it's got like in the two floors. The first floor, they arranged it chronology. What does it mean, chronology? It means according to the timeline. So first of all, we have the Old Kingdom, we have the Middle Kingdom, and we do have the New Kingdom by the end of the first floor. In the second floor, they actually display it according to the category or according to the collection itself. Let's start our tour in the first floor, and the most important thing in here we will see it is the central hall, but lots of collection, but it's not according to the time, it's not chronology. So it is something very important to show us different collection from different periods of the Egyptian history. But let me tell you that before we start our tour inside the museum, you need to get a very, very brief introduction about the Egyptian history. The first display, or the most important display we can see, it is actually the Narmer Pallete, where we can get the story of the early beginning of the unification between Upper and Lower Egypt. And this is actually telling us the story of the king Hur-Aha or Zamenis in the first dynasty, and actually showing us the story of the unification between Upper and Lower Egypt and the efforts which our great kings made it in the early beginning of our history. Then the display will guide us into the Old Kingdom, and in the Old Kingdom we have a great collection during that time. So the Old Kingdom itself started by the time of the king Djoser or the king Djoser, who built the step pyramid of Saqqara. So we will see his statue, we will see statues of the king Khafre, the king Macarenus. We will see very different and massive collection dates back to the Old Kingdom, like the statue of the queen, or the collection of the queen Hatshepsut, the gaze of Maidum, Khufu and Khafra and Menkaure, the Triad of the king Menkaure himself. All this one we are going to see it in the display of the Old Kingdom. And the first floor as well, we are going to enjoy the Middle Kingdom collection, started by the king Menkaure Nebhebtra, Menkaure Nebhebtra or Menkaure II Nebhebtra. And by the way, once you see this statue, you know that you end with the Old Kingdom collection, and it is actually the beginning of the Middle Kingdom collection. And the king himself dates back to the 21st century BC and the 11th dynasty of the ancient Egyptian and the great pharaohs. And in the display of the Middle Kingdom, we will see the 11th, 12th, and the 13th dynasty. Let's go ahead together to the New Kingdom, and this is a time of glory, the time of greatness, what we can call it the Egyptian Empire. In the Egyptian collection of the New Kingdom, it is actually started by the lovely and nice head of the Queen Hatshepsut, which they got it from the temple of Deir el-Bahri of the Queen Hatshepsut herself. Once we found the King Ahmose I, kick out the foreigner people who called them Hyksos. He established the Egyptian New Kingdom, which we can call it the golden period of the Egyptian history. In that time, we can enjoy and we can see the exhibits of the 18th, the 19th, and the 20th dynasties, where we can see a very group or a very massive collection of the Egyptian kings and the queens, where we can see the Queen Hatshepsut, the King Akhenaton, the King Ramses II, and Thutmose III. Lots of fine artifacts dates back to the New Kingdom, and by that we can see the third intermediate period, where we can see the time of Tanis and the collection of the golden collection of the late period, especially the collection or the golden collection of the King Basisonis the first. Okay, so what I prefer to start with my valuable guests in the first floor of the museum. By the way, once you get from the entrance of the museum, you will see some royal statues. One in your right side and the other one next to it. So here we will see this statue in our left side. This is the biggest difference between both of them. Both of them, they are royal. So you need to tell your guest about what is the biggest difference between the royal, non-royal, and when you say that it's a royal statue, you need to tell them that, is it representing the king as a live king or as a dead king? The statue in our left side in here, showing the king himself wearing all the sign or the symbol of reality. So start your description, please. When you try to describe a statue, don't say that the statue started by the left leg, the king holding something by his hand. No, start it from the top to the bottom. If I were you, I would start explaining a very brave introduction about the history of the king. I will go ahead into the description of the statue. By the way, you don't have to keep the measurement of each statue. You don't have to keep the material of each statue in your head. You just need to be a good and a nice storyteller. And this will make a very big difference with your guest. So let's start with the statue in our left side. We will see the king himself wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, the cobra giving him the protection, Nemes, this is what we can call it, the headdress, and we will see the false beard of the king himself with very strong muscles, showing him a very active person, and he is wearing the shendit, which we can call it the royal kilt of the Egyptian time, and the king himself step by his left side or by his left leg. The statue itself on a basement or on a base like that. The biggest difference between this one and the other statue in the right side, where we can see the king represented as a dead king. So he is a deceased. So the king himself in here wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt. We can see his false beard. Please try to compare between the false beard with the king in the left side and the right one. The one of the right, it is straight false beard, but the one in the right side, where we can see he is actually concaved, or we can call it surrounded false beard. It means the king represented as a god, the king represented as Osiris, the god of afterlife. By the way, the two hands of the king in a crisscross position, it means the same representation of the god Osiris, the god of afterlife. And both of the 2 feet like that, he is both them, or he is represented to both them together as a mummy. So the right one showing or representing a king as a dead king, but the other one representing the king as a live king. You will ask, or your valuable guest will ask you that question. Does that mean the other kings, the followers, make or build this statue for the king after his death? You will say No, the king himself, he built both of the two statues, but one of them for the temple representing the king as a live king, as a pharaoh, as somebody who control both of Upper and Lower Egypt, but the other one showing the king as a dead king. It's made actually, or the king himself made it specially to represent himself as a god in the second life. So both of them, they actually made during the lifetime of the Egyptian king. Okay, let's speak about the central hall. The most important thing is the central hall you are going to face by yourself. And this is a very unique and lovely piece in the Egyptian Museum. I really prefer to explain it and I love it. It is actually the Pyramidion of the pyramid of the King Amenemhat III. The pyramid of the King Amenemhat III at Djoser. By the way, the King Amenemhat III has more than a pyramid. He built one of these pyramids at Hawara, where we can find it or we can see it in Fayoum, and the other pyramid actually built at Djoser. This Pyramidion in Hurayim, actually discovered at Djoser, was originally at the top of the Black Pyramid of the King Amenemhat III. One of the most important masterpieces which made out of basalt. Okay, let's get together to explain what we can see on the Pyramidion itself. The Pyramidion and its job, as Senor Muhammad asked me that question before, it's represented the Ben. What is the Ben? It is the holy land appeared on the great holy water during the ancient time, or during the first or the beginning of the world, according to the Egyptian mythology. And let's say that this is what the Egyptian people called it, the holy water, or the noon. And the Ben itself appeared like that as a triangular shape, and they represented this Ben on the top of their pyramids, and then on the obelisk later on in the New Kingdom. As we know that we have several of the obelisk in ancient times. Okay, the Pyramidion on here, protected by the vulture opening the wings to give it the protection, and down there we can see the two eyes. Some scholars think that this is like the two eyes of the God Horus himself giving the protection to the pyramid, and some of them actually saying that it could be the way of making the king himself watching the first life as he's supposed to be in the afterlife, like that. By the middle, we can see the circle. It's actually representing the name of the god Ra. Let's get in our right side, we will see Nisuti Beti. This is the titles of the king. Nisuti Beti, it means he is the king of Upper and Royal Egypt, or the king of Upper and Lower Egypt. This is actually telling us about the royal name of the Egyptian king. Inside the cartouche, we can see the name of the king, Amenemhat Ra. This is the name of the king himself, Amenemhat III, Amenemhat Ra. And behind that one, we can see he is Di-Ankhjet. Di-Ankhjet, it's like a prayer for the Egyptian king himself to give him the eternity and immortality life. Let's get the other side of the Pyramidion. We will found it. It is Sa-Ra. Sa-Ra, it means he is a son of God Ra, the god of the sun, and his name Amenemhat. And as well, we can read the hieroglyphics behind it is Di-Ankhjet. It means may he got the eternity and immortality life. All these ones, we know it from the pharaohs, and this is one of the most important, I will say that, wishing of each single king in ancient Egypt to Di-Ankhjet. It means may he got the eternity and immortality life. So guys, when you go into the central hall of the museum, please go and show this and guide your valuable guest into this very unique one. By the way, lots of people speaking about some miracles or some important things, as the people think that this piece itself, it's not a collection or one of the collection from the earth itself, but it's actually coming from the sky. The people speaking about how lovely polishing of this piece, and some of them even try to use this piece to say that aliens built the Egyptian civilizations, or the Atlantic or the Atlantis people build our civilization. Okay, once you get inside the Egyptian museum, you will see the most huge precise statues or the group statue of the king Amenhotep or Amenhotep III and his lovely wife T. Let's speak about the story of the queen T, and even lots of scholars think that she is not Egyptian, or originally was not Egyptian, and she was very, very valuable, important for the king himself. Every single statue we discovered for the couple, showing both of them together in a very lovely scene. Try to see the king himself wearing the nemes. This is a royal headdress, protected by the cupra, holding or having the false spear, just like that, and he is putting both of the two hands on his top, on his lap. And next to him, we will see the queen with a very lovely crown like that, decorated, and even we can see the cupras just like that, and a wig. For me, the best thing we can see on the statue, we can see how is the queen hug the king from that. So this is the hand of the Egyptian queen, and she is actually surrounded the hand into the back of the Egyptian king, where it can tell us the love between both of the king and the queen. And even we can find the royal children at the bottom of the statue. And this statue actually discovered at the Thebes West Bank or Luxor West Bank at the temple of the Queen Amenhotep III, one of the most great temples in Thebes or in Luxor West Bank. So let's start our tour in the museum itself, chronology. So the first piece we will find or we will see, it's actually the red pre-dynastic period, which we can say that the end of Dynasty 0 and the beginning of the first dynasty. It dates back to the time or the region of the King Narmer or the King Menes. I am talking about 301 or 302 BC. The piece itself, it is divided into, or we can speak it about recto and verso. What is recto and verso? It means the face and the back of this one, because the place or the palette itself represented in the two faces. Let's speak about the one in our left side. At the top, we can see the cow in here represented. Some scholar think that it's actually represented the goddesses Hathor, and some others say that it's represented the goddesses Pod. She is a goddess of the sky during the early beginning of the Egyptian civilization. By the middle of the representation of the goddess Pod, we can see the name of the king himself, Narmer or Narmer, as we can read it in the hieroglyphics on the serikh. The serikh, it means the facade of the palace in ancient Egypt. Let's get down. The king himself represented in a hero, or in a very big scale, wearing the crown of Upper Egypt, what we can call it the white crown. He is holding the military mass, and behind him we can see somebody. He is a sandal holder, the sandal holder. And in front of him we can see the great god Horus, the falcon god, the god of protection, according to the methodology of ancient Egypt. And he is holding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Each one, it is actually means Kha. And in hieroglyphics, the word Kha, it means 1,000. It means the god Horus himself giving him the head of mineral or several thousand of enemies. because in that we can see it's started by the head of one of the Egyptian enemy, where the king himself is controlling them. At the bottom of the palette itself, we can see both or two of the enemies of the king himself trying to run away from the fear of the Egyptian king. Let's speak about the other side of the palette. The same decoration started by the goddess part, and at the middle the name of the king, and in the second step we can see the king himself represented in a bit smaller scale than the other face. And we can see the king wearing the Djoser, or the red crown of Lower Egypt, and behind him we can see the sandal holder as well. And his in front of him we can read his name in hieroglyphic. It's Narmer. In front of him we will see somebody in bigger scale than the others, and in front of him we can see some hieroglyphics. It means thit or thigh. The scholar thinks that this is the beginning of the great owner of what we can call it the vizier or the prime minister. So he is the second man after the king. And in front of him we can see some people holding flags. And according to the scholar, ancient Egyptian people, they were the first people ever on the world know about the flags. That's why we can see each one of them holding a flag of one of the famous gods and goddess in that time. In front of these people, we can see like 10 people, like 2, 4, 5 people in 2 registers. It means 10 people with a head cut, and between the 2 legs of each one we can see his head. It means the king himself got the victory and he cut their heads. It means this is the king himself controlled the people or controlled this one, and even he cut their heads. At the middle we can see 2 unreal animals. Some scholars think that they were fighting each other, and at the top of each animal we can see represented of the people of that animal, and some other scholar think that both of the 2 men like that, they are trying to tie, or they are trying to make these animals join each other. It means this is the people trying to make the unification, or they are a part of the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, and each one of these animals representing Upper Egypt and the other one in the Lower Egypt. At the bottom of the stela we can see this great animal. He is a representation of the Egyptian king himself. And here, the king himself represented as a very strong animal, like a bull. And by the way, sometimes the king represented as a lion, and sometimes as a very huge and big ox or a bull. It means he is strong enough, and in front of him, we can see like a fortress of the enemies. The king destroy it, and he is controlling the enemy at the bottom, or the enemy of that fortress. All the palette of the King Narmer himself, showing us how is the ancient Egyptian king himself controlling both of the 2 sides, or the 2 kingdoms of Upper and Lower Egypt. And this is actually one of the most famous recording of the palette in ancient times. So let's start our masterpiece, or our next masterpiece. It is the statue of the King Djoser. This is actually dates back to the 3rd dynasty, the time of the King Djoser himself, and it's discovered at the Serdab chamber, where we found this Serdab chamber on the north side of the pyramid, or the step pyramid of the King Djoser, and the statue itself made out of painted limestone, showing the king wearing the nemesis itself, and he is represented in the Hepsid festival ceremony stuff. So this is a very unique position of the Egyptian king himself, where we can find his hand appeared from the standard, all the dress he is wearing. We still have some traces of the colors painted on the statue of the Egyptian king himself. Okay, here we can see the other hand of the king on his leg as well in that, and even we can see the two earrings of the king appeared from the Nemes itself. When we speak about the Habsat festival, it was one of the most important things. When you go to this statue, you should be a good presenter of speaking about the other side. So for me, I prefer when I speak about one of the pieces, I speak about the original place where we discovered about it. Like the Pyramidion of the King Amenemhat, I speak a bit about Djoser, and then here I speak a bit about Saqqara and about the Habsat festival, which we were speaking about it in details before. Like the third Jubil, or the celebration of each 30 years of the Egyptian kings. And during this great festival, ancient Egyptian king try to say, or try to tell the people that I'm strong enough to rule Egypt for another 30 years. Okay. Let's speak about another masterpiece in the Egyptian Museum. It is the statues, or the group of statues of the king Menkaure, the third king of builder of the third pyramid in Giza. But before I start speaking about that, I know that Zoom will cut off and it will shut down. So guys, less than a minute and the Zoom will stop, and we will restart the Zoom again. تمام يا شباب؟ أنا بعتذر لكم علشان أقل من دقيقة الزوم هيفصل معانا، فهنضطر ندخل مرة تانية معلش.
تمام اوكي.
حبيبي يا سنيور، احنا مع بعض بس لحد ما هو ما يفصل، احنا معاه لحد الآخر يعني. لو حابين كل سيكشن نبدا نقول الاسئله بتاعتنا بعد كل سيكشن، ولا نخلص المتحف كله وبعدين لو عندكم اسئله دي بتاعتكم؟